John Maxwell says it all the time. Talent might get you in the door, but it's character that keeps you there. And we've talked about that in the past from the idea of, say, a football player who has incredible talent but a horrible attitude both on and off the field. It's true of just about any level of sports, whether you're in pee-wee sports or you're in professional sports. If you're a great athlete but a horrible person, it's going to catch up with you, Mr. Football. It's altogether possible that in your career field you can run into the same thing. And most certainly it is true in politics. Now, a confession to make of my own is that in the last primary election, I voted for Ted Cruz. As a conservative, as a Texan, as a politician, as a believer, I felt like Ted Cruz was a great option. I felt like, given all the other alternatives. Now, in the next part of the election, I was torn between Ben Carson and Donald Trump. And as things narrowed down, that my conservative Republican option was Donald Trump. Like that or not, that's not where I started the race, but I didn't have a whole lot of choice in finishing the race if I wanted to vote a conservative Republican. And that's where most of my allegiances lie. Not with the party, and not with the people. I'm a registered Republican because there's not a more conservative party to vote in than that. That holds the same views that I do. The things that I find important and precious in life. But I can tell you, with the commitment made during the election cycle for people to support whoever the nominee was, when it came right down to it, that wasn't what happened. It wasn't that we all threw our chips in for the final candidate in order to make sure that we could overcome the opposing party. No, that wasn't what happened. And even now, even after the election is over and the person has been selected, elected, however you want to label that, to serve, we don't have unison serving in the same direction from those who call themselves conservative. And that bugs me. But here's one of the things that bugs me the most about it. And that is that in leadership, our job is to set an example for good influence, to push people in the right direction, to draw people to us as leaders so that we have an opportunity to influence them. And backbiting and infighting and manipulating against each other, especially those who are supposed to be friends and in the same camp and agree on more than they disagree on, we should be working together at minimum. But whenever possible, to expand our influence beyond those who hold the same 5 or 10 or 12 core beliefs, to expand our influence into the world around us, that's what we as leaders should be doing. And in no more evident place than in politics should that be true. And it disheartens me to know that it's not. That those who would wear the same colors, so to speak, would run the ball the opposite direction. Can you imagine if on a kickoff the ball fell short and landed at the 20-yard line instead of in the end zone, and the runner picked up the ball and then turned around and ran toward his own end zone? That's the end he's supposed to be defending. That's the end he's supposed to be getting the ball away from. And yet, that's what we see in politics today. And it happens on both sides of the aisle. It's ironic when I travel with Usalga to speak in the Congo, that in a room of 50 to 100 delegates, parliament members, and those who soon will be based on the election cycle, we'll have 38 different political parties represented. We're not talking about 50 people from the same political party who can sometimes agree on 5 or 6 core ideas. We're talking about 30 to 40 completely different political parties, different platforms, different ideologies, different end games, different results sought at. And yet, when we come to help them with leadership principles, with good ethics in government. They come together because they see their nation as the best end game, not their own politics, not their own successes. Well, why do I bring all this up? Recently, I was in a conversation and just hanging around the studio after a taping, talking to a guy that we met a couple of years ago, my wife and I. And as we were talking, he says to me, I'm running for U.S. Senate. And I thought, that's interesting. I've always known him just as a studio guy. And so I said, well, tell me more. And so he told me a little bit about his campaign, a little bit about his background. And then he says, I'm running against Ted Cruz. And I thought, well, that could be a tough race. A guy who's been successful enough as Texas senator to stay in office and to run for president and then stay in office. And you know, not everybody likes Ted. Ted's a little abrasive. Ted's a little direct, very conservative, hard to meet in the middle of the aisle kind of guy sometimes. I don't know Ted Cruz personally. I know what the media says about him, and I've been in circles with people who know him personally, but I don't. I have met his dad a couple of times. But as this guy described what his idea was, he invited me to come to a meet and greet to get to know him and hear a little bit about what his platform is. And I thought, I guess I'm game for that. But I asked him one very simple question. Why would a conservative run against another conservative for the same seat? And he said, well, while there are many things that we agree on, Senator Cruz and I, there are a couple of things that we don't. And bottom line is, what I offer is simply a different style of leadership. Okay, I'm kind of addicted to the concept of leadership and the ideologies behind good, solid leadership. And I really perked up when I heard that. So my wife and I cleared our schedule, and we had an opportunity to go last night. And I think there were 60 or 75 other people who showed up for a meet and greet. And a couple of people stood up and spoke kind words, which you would expect. And a couple of people said, this is how I know him, and you would expect that. And then he got up and started talking about how he was different and why people might consider him a good candidate. And it came down to a couple of questions. What makes you different? Leadership style. Okay. Tell me something specific about your leadership style that makes you different than Senator Ted Cruz. And the integrity issue came up. Now, I haven't seen much in the way of political announcements that attack Ted Cruz's integrity, with the exception of a couple of things. And some of them I know were media attacks because they don't like his conservative ideas. I get that. But, you know, the Goldman Sachs thing, maybe there's something to that. I don't know. I really don't know. I know it made media attention for a while, and then it kind of went away. But the idea of standing in front of tens of thousands of people and saying, I will support whoever is nominated, whether it's me or somebody else, and then saying, I will support anybody but who was nominated because I don't agree with them being nominated. That's a bit of an integrity issue. And then when asked the question, will you commit to the next 6 years as senator, because that's the term, as opposed to running for president during the midterm, or running for the president at the end of Donald Trump's first term, there was no commitment to that. Now, I honor the fact that he would say, I'm not going to make a vow and then break it, as opposed to the first time, but I am concerned that being the Texas senator is not his highest priority. It's a stepping stone to being president, which is totally cool for me. Like I said, I would have voted for him the first time. But to take one job only for the purpose of getting to the next, I'm not sure that's the kind of integrity leadership I'm looking for. I like the fact that here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, there are some who have been elected to city council, an entire and I won't even say what city, but the entire city council, when they signed on to their own term elections. They want to serve with term mandates. They can only serve a certain number of terms and then they're out. That was by choice. They agreed on it before they signed up. When they signed up to run, they knew that they would have a selected number of terms and then they'd be done. Not 10, 12, 15, 60, 75 years, but term limits. I like that idea. I like the idea that people would commit to the process, to be involved where they're going to commit to be involved until what they're doing is done, until their term is up and it's time for someone else to come in and do the job, but to be committed to where they're supposed to be until they're supposed to do something else. Senator Ted Cruz is unwilling to make that commitment that he will support and represent the state of Texas until he's done. Or at least until another opportunity comes along, right? I have to agree that bugs me a bit. So when I met Bruce Jacobson, I knew him as a studio guy. I knew him as the guy who was the executive producer of a TV show. I didn't know much more about it than that. Seemed like a nice enough guy. We had a few conversations in the studio after. I got to know him a little bit. I think we've connected on Facebook. If we did, I'll have to look and see. I'm not sure if we're connected on Facebook or not, but if we are, I will tag him in this video so that he can see that I'm talking about him. But I have to say, after what I heard last night, and what I heard from him and what I heard about him, and the few people that were there that I had a chance to chat with after to get to know him a little better, I like him. I like what he stands for. I like what he believes. From what I can gather from the couple of times that we've talked about it and the meeting last night, I like his leadership style. I like his humility. He does have some experience in politics. In fact, I would have never known, having met him in the studio and knowing that he's worked in that studio for almost 2.5 decades, that prior to that, he had a degree in poli-sci and served in 2 full 8-term presidencies and at some pretty high appointed levels. But he didn't feel like he was led to stay in politics after that 16 years, and he went into media. There's something to be said for knowing where you're supposed to be and knowing when you're not supposed to be there. For hearing that whisper. Yesterday morning, I had a chance, while having coffee and waiting for another appointment to show up, to chat with a guy who just recently ran for city council. And Corey's got some great ideas. Corey's got some great notions about what needs to change. I'm sure if we went right down the list, there'd be some that I agree with and some that I disagree with. But the fact that as just a local businessman, he had the courage to say, I'm running for city council. I think things need to change, and here's what I'm going to do. I think he said he got about 30% of the vote, which is certainly not enough to win an election. Not enough to get past the primaries even. I don't even know that that's necessary in the city he was running in. I think it was just a one and done kind of, you win or you don't. But I asked him, are you going to run again? And he said, I think the more I think about it, the more I pray about it, I have just as much influence opportunity if my business is a success than I do in political office. It's pretty powerful when you understand where you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to be doing, what your circles of influence are intended to be, and you're operating in that. And so I believe that Bruce isn't running for Texas, for U.S. Senator from Texas, because he has some grand ambitions to be the president or anything like that. I genuinely believe that he feels like this is what he's supposed to do at this season in his life. And that after taking 2.5 decades off from politics, now's the time, now's the season, now's the opportunity to contribute to that process. I know there are people watching this video who don't agree with any of the conservative ideas that I hold. And I know there are some who are watching this who are going, anybody to run against Ted Cruz would be an awesome thing for me. And there are some that are watching this who are going, but we love Ted Cruz and we thought you did, and why would you change horses? And I have to be honest. My purpose in this life is to equip the saints for the work of the kingdom. My greatest allegiance is to one, and next to my family. And if I believe that the ideologies, that the principles, that the practices supported by any particular candidate help me to help others, to lead others the way that I'm supposed to, if those ideologies and those practices and those decisions and those votes on the Capitol floor will help me to be a better father and a better dad and a better husband and a better employee and employer, then I'm all over it. I will invest time and talent and treasure and attention into their success if it's going to do the same in return for the majority of the American people. I think we've allowed politics to blur the line until we lose sight of people. Politics was never intended to be us versus them, with the us being those at Capitol Hill and them being the population. But I'm afraid in many camps that's what it's become. And in some camps it's not just us Capitol Hill versus them population, but it's us conservative versus them middle of the road and them liberal. And that's not what it's supposed to be either. We shouldn't just be fighting over our own ideologies. Every one of us should be fighting for what's best for the American people. And you know when that fails? When the American people remain silent. When they don't get involved. When they have nothing to say. I think it's time that we speak up. I'm not going to tell you to vote for Bruce Jacobson Jr. I am going to challenge you as leaders and influencers to do your homework. You got about 3 weeks to decide to vote. Let that be an easy decision. You should decide to vote. That's a no-brainer. If you pay taxes and drive on the roads and attend the schools and expect a fireman to show up or a police officer to show up when you have a problem, then you have a say and your voice needs to be heard. Vote. Go vote. I don't care who you vote for, Democrat or Republican. I don't care who you vote for on either one of those tickets, whether they're more liberal or more conservative, but vote. Get busy and get involved. You have an obligation as an American citizen to do that. But I will encourage you to do your homework. And don't just vote because it's a D or an R. Don't just vote because they're liberal or conservative. Don't just vote because they share the same skin color or religious beliefs. Vote because you have an idea who the person is and what they stand for. And because this particular video, I'm talking about this particular individual, I'm going to put a link to their website for Bruce Jacobson. I believe it's Bruce Jacobson for Texas, or maybe it's just Bruce for Texas. I'll find the website. I'll put it in the link in the description of this video so that you can go and check it out. I have to say, of the candidates I've had a chance to meet and have a conversation with, Bruce is the least politician-like person that I've met. It doesn't mean he's not politically savvy. It doesn't mean he doesn't understand how the game is played. It doesn't mean he doesn't know how to win. I'm just telling you from everything I've seen so far, he comes across as a genuine, down-to-earth, honest husband, honest father, honest businessman, loyal employee, committed to doing what's right, not what gets him ahead. And I appreciate that. in your circles of influence, will you just share this idea? Number one, that we have as American citizens an obligation to get involved and not let life happen to us, but do something about it. And number two, to get to know the people that you're electing, not for their D's or their R's, not for their religious affiliations or skin colors, but because the ideas that they hold will make our country a better place. And get to know whether or not they're people of integrity, because that's a pretty big deal. Like I said, I don't remember off the top of my head if it's Bruce Jacobson for Texas or brucefortexas.com. It's one of those two, and I will put a link in the text. But do your homework. Watch some of his videos. Google him and see what else he's had to say other places than his own promotions. Decide for yourself, but decide and do something about it. Go vote. Get involved. I don't care who you vote for, but I care that you vote. I'm J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.